Atlanta is just really like the power structure center of the Southeast.
You sort of start to live and breathe this, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere mentality. So like, do that.
But there's also this internal work of overcoming the fear of being the only person in your family who's willing to do something different to get a different result.
The other standing joke is no one's from Atlanta.
Right.
His job had layoffs and we were about to get married. And so we're like, wait a second. We made a choice right then that we would only ever need one income.
You have to figure it out. That's the only option.
Food is a universal language. When we eat together
And drink together, we learn together.
and there are few topics more important to learn
And more taboo
than money.
So join us as we travel around the country, supporting small businesses,
Enjoying delicious food
having amazing drinks, and
and
putting money on the table.
So we brought you guys together for a reason, a couple of reasons. I think the big one is we want to celebrate, this, Atlanta, being a really special city, and really kind of Atlanta being a special city at a really important and meaningful time. And so, and also selfishly, like there are a lot of people that I know that are like exploring and have heard, is it really that dope in Atlanta? Like, what's going on? But not a lot of people have actually made the jump and says, you know what, I'm gonna move shop and move my family. And so this whole time I thought you were like the only person that I knew born and raised in Atlanta, because you are like Mr. Atlanta.
Yeah, but I'm old Atlanta, not just being in mid-40s, but I moved here in 95. Okay. So when you move to Atlanta before the Olympics and while Freaknik is still going on, and I now am older, like, some people on my staff, I'm twice their age, and they're born and raised in Atlanta, but they can't tell me Atlanta like I know Atlanta. I'm like, where were you? Where were you when Club Nicky's was open? You know what I mean? Like, where were you when we used to hit the warehouse and everything? So I can just name drop stuff, Atlanta Live and everything, then the bounce. So that's the thing, is that I moved here from Huntsville, Alabama, where I was raised. And, again, I just love the city so much. Also being a Southeasterner, because I was born in Nashville, Atlanta is just really like the power structure center of the Southeast. So if you're anywhere in there and you really want to like up the game, but keep it Southern and stay with your taste for nature and the four seasons, the weather and all that stuff, then it really is Atlanta. You want to do something in banking, you want to have that cultural experience. So for me, I was just like, Huntsville, beautiful as it is, it doesn't have the opportunity and it doesn't see endless possibility like Atlanta does. So I've just like never looked back. And I've been here longer than I was when the town I was raised. So yeah, I'm an Atlantan. Folks can debate, you fight me if you want. You'll probably win if you fight me, but I'm gonna still say I'm an Atlantan.
So I was just talking to a friend of mine, especially with New Yorkers, and he was like shocked by like the Southern hospitality. He was like, I went to this store and the lady was like, oh nice. He was like, oh, I was like, he thought it was like a setup. You know what I mean? But I think it's interesting, especially when you come from New York, because like that's, we've been out here for a long time, so it sounds like a cliche.
Yeah.
But it's a very real thing.
That happened to me.
Really?
I mean, when I moved here, I was like, why is everybody smiling? Like, people were just like really nice. My best friend was always like, what? Like, why are they offering to open the door? Like, what's happening?
So you know her.
Right, yeah. I mean, it was weird. It was bizarre. But I mean, everybody was just excellent. I mean, of course, you have, your little pockets and so forth, but it was just the hospitality you felt it different than from the city.
What role do you think, and I'm thinking about all the people that are doing the mental math, right? And so they know that, if I move down to Atlanta, I get it. I can get this much more house, way more bang for my buck. But they can't sort of get over the hump, right? Because they always say, yeah, but then I won't be able to find the same job or the same industry. Like what advice would you give them or perspective would you give them so that they might say, you know what, maybe I'll reconsider?
Yeah, I mean, there's a checks and balances, right? Like for me, I just took a risk, right? And decided that, I wasn't gonna make probably the same amount of money. Just check it out. I actually wasn't planning on moving to Atlanta. I was working on moving back to California.
Wow.
And found this gig. It was good, paid well. But I was like, Atlanta though, like I don't know nothing about Atlanta. Like I just never thought about it. But I said, you know what? Take a risk. All else fails, I move back. I have my roots in Chicago. I can be there, check it out, figure it out. But then I looked at the taxes of my house in Chicago versus the taxes that you pay here. I was paying $13,000 a year in Chicago for taxes.
Wow.
Okay. Now here, you could buy a home for what, $2,000 taxes a year. So you might not be making the same amount of money, but it balances out in the long run, right?
Yeah.
The cost of living is a lot lower, right? Even vacationing. For me, it was a game changer that I could go to the ocean from different sides, right? I could go to Destin, I could go to Tybee Island, I could go to the mountains. So even vacationing becomes more affordable. You're able to actually do a lot more activities that you could not do in Chicago. I mean, how long are we not indoors, right? Because it's snowing, it's raining, or just simply cold.
Yeah.
Here you have the opportunity to be exposed to do things. So, it affects your pocketbook. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just explore it. Take a look at those taxes. For me, that was a game changer. Sold my house, best thing I ever did. Looking for one here and excited for it. So, let go of the fear.
I would tell any of those people, come down here and see how desirable you are in the Atlanta job market. You actually would be more desirable than you might think you would be, so drop the fear.
There's huge companies here too, right? Like that was a big surprise to me. I was like, whoa.
I think at last count we had 9 or 10 of the Fortune 100 have their headquarters here. And then obviously our local government is trying to attract more, especially now that a lot of companies have given up the idea of like a headquarter in a high cost of living city. So there's definitely opportunity here, and I think people are surprised at how vast the industries are, from media to entertainment to music to retail. There's just a ton of opportunity in terms of industry and jobs.
Did either of you take a hit when you left? Like a major financial hit?
I did not. So that's actually a good point. So same as what you were saying, the fear and the industries and everything, but I moved to Atlanta as a C-suite executive in a global organization. And so I moved here with the understanding that I would be able to do my role no matter where I was. So in my role, hopping on a plane and going to any of the States or going to, Europe, you can do that from Atlanta. It's very simple. It's even, for me, a little bit more simple than it was in Chicago, and kind of coordinating some things. And so that transition here, that was the reality for me. And then now, moving into a different industry in tech, you look at all the major tech organizations who now have either major offices, headquarters, or considering that in the context of this great new reshaping of what work is. And so when you think about, you could be in the valley out west in terms of, how you serve, but actually sitting here, in Georgia, that's a reality for thousands and thousands of people right now, because that's the reality that I'm living. And so when people think about this from a fear standpoint, it often does come from the place of, okay, will I, be able to, do X, Y, and Z in my career, or climb the ladder if that's your aspiration, or, start a business or do any of those things. I have to really share with them when I speak to them is that that's actually what I do or have done. And when you think about the quality of executives, the quality of talent that you're able to get, and when you have that flexibility in terms of like your approach to work, a lot of companies are embracing that now, because they know that not everyone wants to live on the coast, not everyone wants to live, in New York or Chicago, et cetera. And they're also seeing the great amount of opportunity in Atlanta just from their own business growth. And so there's this wave happening right now that as people really consider what's next for them, there are roots from most major companies here. It's just really about recognizing that and starting to network and do the things you need to do to reposition yourself, if that's what you want to do, or just take your job and then do it elsewhere, which is what I did. And it worked out fabulously for myself and my family.
Yeah.
at a very high level, the numbers came into play when we did start looking for a house in New York, when we knew we were having our first son, and we both had good paying jobs. And we went looking, and based on like what we thought a good first home should be for, and our incomes and all this stuff, we couldn't find anything closer than, way out in Queens. And even then it was like $500,000 for a little 2-bedroom that was smaller than the 2-bedroom we were renting. Yeah. So it was like, well, this isn't going to work. I don't want to be house poor. We didn't want to invest everything we had worked for and the 2 salaries we had that gave us a very comfortable life to suddenly feeling like, oh, we can't go out, or we can't, we have to cut back all these different things. So that was where it started. And as we kind of dug into it more, we did actually look at like, what does it cost us to live for a year in New York, which is hard to pin down because, it's a very social city, a lot of drinking happening. Like there's this stuff, cars, Uber stuff, like it's hard to be like, where did all my money go? But once we started drilling into that, it was like, okay, well, this is what this looks like. And when we got here, we spent our first year focusing in just as closely. Yeah. And there was this huge difference. So that was even with me leaving my job. Yeah. Because we also did the math around like, what are we paying for childcare plus rent and all these things? And rent and childcare are like this in New York. Those both came down in Atlanta. We were able to rent very comfortably and then to buy a house. And still, we didn't really take a hit moving backwards, even with me stepping into a role as a full-time dad and saving that money on childcare, as well as allowing me to have that experience with my kids, and really be there for their early years of life. That is where it became a no-brainer. It was just like, this can be such a better life, or even just kind of an equivalent life with less effort. Yeah. And I think to people that are in New York, that are hesitant or there's some risk, like you're saying, you got to make the jump. If you've been a New Yorker for any amount of time, you sort of start to live and breathe this, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere mentality. So like, do that, right? Like that's why you say, that's a good point. If you're a kid like me from the Midwest, and it's like, I got to get there. I got there and I did it. And now I can do whatever else I want. Like I really believe that. I could have moved to LA. I could have continued my career there. So Atlanta, didn't feel any more complicated than that.
That's a good point.
We had contemplated moving overseas. Like, do we want to go live in Amsterdam? Do we want to live in Paris? We know people have done that, and that's a big risk and a big jump. But this felt like, we have family, there's a support system, we have friends, we know other people that are doing it. Yeah. All the cool kids are doing it.
Well, it's interesting because it's a great point that other people are doing it. Atlanta is known as a transplant city. There's a joke about our sports teams that when you go to a game, the opposing team is actually the home team because there's more people from where they are than Atlanta in the stands. And I'm curious, I guess, Mike, if you've heard anything from like, if there's any tension between old Atlanta trying to protect the culture that we built, South got something to say.
But it's like this though, I'm tired of folks, you know what I'm saying? Even though nobody want to hear, but it's like this, the South got something to say, that's all I got to say.
And then all of these transplants coming in and maybe the city losing its soul, or are we gaining something from kind of the diversity of tenants?
We're in a time where, from my viewpoint, that's yet to be really seen. There's certainly tension. Yeah. So a lot of it is because you're looking at Atlanta, and obviously I think a lot of people want to like boil it down to just gentrification. And Atlanta is losing its majority black population, city of Atlanta proper, which may mean we don't have a black mayor, which then what happens, and all of the culture that we built up, and we lose that cultural currency and everything. But really you have to look a little bit deeper than that. That is part of what the conversation is and fairly should be. But the other part of it is Atlanta does not do historically a good job of preserving and appreciating its own history. So that's a lot of the issue, is that we would wipe things out regardless of whether or not anything was coming. And one true thing is, when I moved here in 95, I remember coming through downtown on the way to go to my dorm at Morehouse with my family, and I remember downtown looked like General Sherman had just got finished lighting the fires. Like, some of the buildings look like they might still be smoking. I'm like, what the heck? Like, is this downtown Atlanta? Like, it was corners of buildings missing. It was Mad Max. I mean, I'm like, whoa. So that has to be fixed. We have to improve things. But it's also one of those things of like, because of that fire, I theorize, this city lost a lot of that old school, historic downtown district thing that a lot of these Charlestons and other places have.
Boston,
And right, so we don't have that, and because we got rid of that, we are always glossing over and the new this, the new that. So old Atlanta's beef is the fact that they know that there is no real old Atlanta. Old Atlanta is what does the next mayoral race, which we're in that election year now, what consequences will that have? What consequence does trap music have on the Dungeon Family, Outkast, Goody Mob fan culture of Atlanta? And what feeling does that have on the SOS band culture of Atlanta? And like all of the transplants of Chicago steppers who come down here, and there's all of these interacting cultures of different cities that are part of it, because really the other standing joke is no one's from Atlanta.
Right.
And
you meet a Grady baby, you need to take a picture with him.
oh yeah, man, they're rare, like it's like seeing a peacock in the street, you know what I mean? But
shout out to the Grady babies.
yeah. But I think it's ongoing. It's yet to be seen what the true definition of old Atlanta is, and I think a lot of people, honestly, from my conversations, they're ready for us to not hold on to old Atlanta so much that we don't get to where the city is as undeniably great as all of us know it is. So we should probably ease up a little bit and just be part of the solution that we think can build us a platform where we can keep growing.
We found a stat that said the average American, or it might have been like something like 50 or 60% of America lives a certain number of miles away from their mother. You want to guess what that number is?
20.
18. Yeah, I want to say the number was 18. Yeah. And so you guys are talking about like moving away from family, and I know that plays a role. And how did you, I guess, overcome that obstacle? Because that's a big part of why people don't leave. It's like, I hear you, I can save money, the industry's booming, I can get more bang for my buck on a house, but this is where my mom is, right? So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, we were brought up with the idea of never leave money on the table, follow the opportunity.
Yes.
There you go.
That's it.
Did I follow the opportunity?
Hold on, did they say that in Spanish or no?
Can I say it in Spanish?
Absolutely.
Yeah, nunca hay que dejar dinero en la mesa.
Yes,
That's right. And you follow the opportunity. Family will always be at heart, and then we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
So I took the risk. I had no family here, single, no kids. I followed the opportunity, and I just figured, like you said, it's just a short flight to Chicago. It's an hour 45 or something. I'm like, I'll be right back, If if all else fails, I'll be back. Mom, you could always come and so forth, but in due time, I mean, they figured it out too, and they saw that there's definitely opportunity here. It's a way better life to live in terms of just the weather and opportunities and so forth, and I'm working on getting my mom here. My sister, I just got her here. I've been here 6 years. She just got here right before the pandemic.
Nice.
So we were locked down together, but that's great. We, explored nature, so that was great. That's what we love. That's what we do. We kayak, we hike. We're big outdoor people, which we couldn't really do in Chicago. But now, Mom, I just sold her house, working on getting her here. So in due time, if family will follow. Like you said, there's seasons. I had to take, part away for a little while, create what I needed to do to anchor down. She's coming, sister's coming, brother's still out, he's still partying in Chicago. He's like, I'm not letting that go yet. No. That whole scene's another thing. But my aunt and my uncle, their children are in college. Nice. They're really liking it out here.
I feel like that's one of the things that's missing when we talk about building wealth and being first generation anything. It's that you're often the only as well. You're the only person in your family that's willing to move. You're the only person who's willing to pick up and leave and do something different. And I think we need more stories like this to talk about, like, yes, it is getting the job, opening the IRA, registering for a 401k, doing all of the tactics, but there's also this internal work of overcoming the fear of being the only person in your family who's willing to do something different to get a different result.
Even the move itself can sometimes be the facilitator of just getting out of your old habits. You know, just putting all your stuff in a box and going to a new place, like you have to figure it out. That's the only option. And you know, you have those moments in your life, like if you graduate high school, graduate college, like there's momentum there, or and this can be a moment you can make for yourself.
So when we first started blogging and talking about money, we were obviously interested in like investing and real estate and all of these other ways to grow money, but we actually found that the more interesting parts of money was like the role that it played in life and where it intersected with other parts of like society and culture. And one of the things that we identified was this rise in women as breadwinners in the household and the role that that plays in everything, financial planning, or decision making, deciding to move to a place, right? Like it's not just, hey, this is a place where I want to move because this is where I want our children to be safer. It's also actually financially, I may be in a more advantageous position, or financially I have equal sort of, you know, responsibility for our family's direction. And I wanted to see, one, if you guys noticed that, and two, if that played a role at all in your decisions to move to Atlanta.
One thing about Atlanta women is they are about a bag. Like, Atlanta women do not struggle with the idea of having a side hustle or a second stream of income, or like striving to
is it the air?
Eventually own their own business. It is the vitamin
Pause.
D.
I was gonna leave it there. I was gonna see if anybody picked up what I was putting down, but you know.
Oh man! As soon as we try to uplift the woman,
it is uplifting. I would say. You know, I would say the woman might say it is uplifting. You know? We can do this all day, ladies and gentlemen.
So I think there is truth to that. Like, I think so a couple of things in terms of just overall finances and just how you manage that when and everybody's in different types of households and setups and partnerships, but my husband and I, we, you know, locked arms and said we are married, we are in love, we love each other. Like one of our first like tests and moments was a finance test. And it was just really looking at, okay, like his job had layoffs and we were about to get married. And so we're like, wait a second, we made a choice right then that we would only ever need one income, regardless of what we do. We also made a choice of we'll ebb and flow with whose career situation is exciting and attractive. And so for us, we already had that as our foundation, so that like we always like lived within our means and, you know, still have a ton of fun, but we kind of knew what's important for us. And so as we both kind of grew in our careers and the option to move and all that came up, we really looked and said, what are our respective jobs doing? Our situation was that my husband works in tech as well, so he was able to, you know, transfer, you know, get an awesome job. I was able to work, so it just kind of agreed. But if there were a situation where that was not the case and it felt more lopsided, I think that we still would have made the choice to be here, because the upside of being here and figuring it out was a little bit better than, you know, being in Chicago in the same circumstance. And I put that on, like, you know, we're paying tuition for preschool for one child. So when I think about our bill for paying for just a kid going to school when we're in Chicago, there's more upside to being in Atlanta for our children. Our priority is our family over everything. You could be breadwinner one month and you be breadwinner this year. We go back and forth. My husband and I have gone back and forth our whole relationship. Sometimes he's up, sometimes I'm up, but we look at it as one pot, so it's not, we don't look at it as that way. Yeah, it's our money. So, you know, and so we make that macro level decision. And if that even means walking away, we have that on the table too, because our family's most important. And sometimes the season dictates that. There's dads at the table, so I'm not gonna offend you all, but my husband literally is the best father, sorry. So, you know, when we had our sons, both times, he completely left work to be there from day one to help with my maternity leave. And we took our leaves together, and that set a tone for our relationship. And so that's a financial decision too, if you're in an organization that doesn't have paid leave. But you have to set yourself up financially as a couple to make those kind of decisions, or we have like walking away. You have to have some, you know, so oh no, heck no money.
Oh no, hell no, man, y'all done up and done it. Oh no, hell no.
I wanted Jackie to chime in because I think the term breadwinning is so often applied to dual income houses, but there are a lot of women who are single either by choice or not that are head of household and have been breadwinning the whole time and still have to go through these financial milestones of purchasing a house, and it's harder, it's different, and so I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, we operated, well, the way that my family structure is set up is, I like to think of it as a powerhouse, right? Like it's mom as the anchor, it's me, my sister, and my brother. They're younger, I'm the oldest, I've been the first at everything, right?
And do you think that's unique to your culture?
No, I don't think it's unique to our culture. I think it happens a lot in our culture. But the way that we operated is basically, how do we figure out, as the breadwinner, how do we tag each other in to build each other up, right? But at the same time, I was always the one taking the risk, right? Making sure that, all right, you go to college, you know, look at, you know, life insurance, etc. Also, I may not have children. My brother and sister don't have children, but we have elderly parents. So the way that we have to really take a look at our finances is, okay, how are we going to take care of these folk when they're down, right? When there's emergency expenses, medical expenses, and the same to us, because we don't have partners that are able to actually take care of us or share that dual income.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So we have to figure out, okay, how do we stash up to actually make that happen? I think that a lot of what I don't think people talk about is how you can actually lean into your internal family for support, right? The reason I call my home, my family structure, the powerhouse is because we were in and out of mom's house, right? We all invested in mom's house. We all had our different apartments at different times, but guess what? We all ended up coming back at one point or another, right? My brother in his 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, like we were just tagging each other in as we built each other up. And there's no shame in that.
No.
Like I think a lot of times people look at it as, oh, well, you're back at your mom's house or whatever, and it's just
actually
like,
discouraged.
Actually, look at what I just did though, right?
Yeah.
Or actually that gave me the opportunity to actually bounce and leave and actually take the risk because I did have that additional income to make that move.
You know, I always give my older brother, he's 11 years older than me, with the Morehouse too. He had a ex-girlfriend, Tanya Gibson, who I will always love because he should have married this woman. Because she loved my brother, she took time when I was a kid and gave me some game, and she was like, Mike, it's all about delayed gratification. And she burned that idea into my head so solidly that it was like one of those pieces of game that when once you hear it, that becomes the mode that you think in from there on out. That is now part of who you are. And I think when it comes to breadwinners, equality and how it works in each financial situation for your household, whether it's marriage, partnership, whatever it looks like, it is, you know, looking at Atlanta and saying, compare this 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in this area to what you would get in New York City. And do you need to have the look right now, or can you get by extremely comfortably, just not in a way that the cameras are gonna be there all the time and you're gonna be able to parade everyone through and be like, look at the opulence here. It's like, no. Look at the savings account, the Roth IRA. Look at the fact that we have paid all of our cars down and the mortgage is here and we can do this very rapidly. So all that delayed gratification plays into part of, I think, the strategy of what a household has to think about. My wife is also, we met as journalists and I didn't know she was as beautiful as she was, so I was like, oh, it's a wrap. So, but she's also a writer, freelancer, done all kind of stuff, has more street cred than I do, but she's just the introvert. But she's able to write novels. She's written 10 novels and can do all of those things because I am the full-time employee of the house that takes care of a lot of those things. So she gets to keep that purity of being an author, being a novelist, being a journalist that does only what she wants to do. And that has a dynamic on us being this couple that's kind of connected to a lot of Atlanta.
You know, I've had lots of conversations with guy friends that like won't even propose. It's like, well, I gotta finish school, I gotta do this, I gotta have this job. It's like, she might leave before that.
Right.
She's not gonna sit around for 6 years while you try to get everything where you think it needs to be perfect. And I think having that, like just an open-mindedness to like, look, if this person loves you and you love them, who's doing what? That's the stuff that's all secondary and tertiary. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, I love your story of like just we push each other forward, we go backwards, forwards, like you take your time, I take my time. Even, you know, it should act more like a family, right? If you are a true couple, it's like family, and you have to approach it that way, that if you're doing good, I'm doing good. We don't have to both be killing it. Sometimes we will.
It's like a band, you know?
Yes.
Like it's just gotta be the right rhythm.
One band,
right?
one sound.
And somebody got to play the tambourine. Tambourine, motherfucker, tambourine.